internally, we probably always had a little bet of like who was going to be the first one to, I guess, is it the short straw or the long straw for the first Super Bowl in UHD/HDR? So can we make this official? Is this it?
I'm not going to tell you. Yes, it is it. And Kevin's going to explain it in a fabulous video he produced. Go hit it, Kevin.
Huh? I was supposed to produce a video?
Never do the video.
Never do the video.
Right. All right.
Sorry, Alicia.
So let's.
So yeah, UHD. What are we doing, Kev?
So we're following the model that we used for Thursday Night Football this year. We'll be producing the game itself in 1080p HDR. On top of that, what's different for us from what we do on Thursday Night Football, everything that originates from Miami live on Super Bowl Sunday, starting at 1 p.m., will be produced in 1080p HDR. So all of our studio programming leading up to it, as well as the game. We've been working with the halftime show folks, and they're going to be producing their halftime performance in 1080p HDR and delivering that to us. So from 1 p.m. till 11 p.m., complete UHD HDR.
Cool.
Or 1080p HDR.
So why, you ask, are we not doing it in 4K? Good question, Ken. So it's a good question, really. I mean, Alessandro and I were up here yesterday debating the merits of 4K or not 4K, and I think that sometimes UHD is used interchangeably with 4K, but there's a lot of good reasons that 4K winds up being not only technically more difficult / impossible to do a show of this size, but also that there are some real reasons why sports in general looks better in 1080p versus being shot natively in 4K.
If we're talking about 60 frames a second.
If we are, which we are. So
the pixel offset is what they call that.
Pixel offset, correct.
Which is why the Japanese want to do 8K at 120 frames per second.
That's correct. That the more frames you get, the more times the refresh happens, so that if you're panning from left to right, that the pixels will not blur quite as much. So it's 60 frames, 4K, you will get more motion blur in action scenes. You can see this in hockey right now, which has been done in 4K. And hence, we still must remember that while it's all well and good that we are doing this in UHD, that very few people will be seeing it that way. And we do need to serve the greater audience of 100+ million people domestically and make sure that the experience is good for them. That's a good question, Ken.
So I know that this is... So, let's go to the carriage situation, because I know that obviously one of the big issues with all these big events is that the local stations of any network in the United States cannot currently distribute UHD, HDR over the air. ATSC 3.0 is supposedly going to solve this at some point, but who knows how far that is. So, and I know an event like this, everyone's concerned with every viewer not tuning in. So was that a discussion point at all? Were the stations... I mean, is that above?
Oh yeah, I mean it's for the distribution people to manage that. I mean, the thing you must remember is that there is, I mean, it's a growing audience, right? But it's not a huge audience at all. And Ken, to your point, that there are very few ways to watch it. You can watch it on DirecTV and other MVPDs. You can watch it on virtual MVPDs. Like our own Fox Sports app. And Fubo and different things. But overall, this is just like back in the HD days when we were SD. I mean, it starts off very, very small. So I don't think that, while it certainly was talked about, we had Thursday Night Football, which was doing the same thing. So, but yeah, more of a distribution question.
The one difference I'll say, speaking for our distribution folks, one of the big differences between the Thursday Night Football experience and the Super Bowl experience is that it will be Nielsen watermarked. So those viewers will be counted.
Oh, really? Okay. So this was not on my questions, but I'll throw it out here anyway. So next year you have this event being done in 1080p HDR, UHD Upconverted. That'll get a lot of press from the consumer magazines and newspapers. Obviously the Fox stations, I'm sure, will be talking about it. The Olympics next year will be all HDR. There'll be a lot of UHD, even some 8K. And obviously they're going also all IP. But what is, that's two big, massive tentpole events. Tentpole events next year making the leap. So is there a bigger trend here? Is this is 2021 this going to be the norm, you think, for, I don't know what the Masters has going on or other big golf events, but.
We're in the middle of an inflection point. It could be an inflection point that lasts a long time. Obviously, we were talking yesterday about, IP trucks and IP workflow. I mean, the reason that people are putting those types of things in plants, in trucks, is to hedge against those types of formats coming up. But speaking for Fox, that we are doing more and more in UHD, period, end of story. And every year, I think we're slated to do even more. So, we just need to find out when that distribution model is going to make it available in a more wider audience. But for now, it'll be an ever-increasing slate of live events in UHD.
Sure. Okay, so let's roll through some of the, let's start with some of the partners, because I know there's a lot of technology providers working with you on this project. Do you want to roll through some of those?
Why don't you take that, Kevin? Then if you
Pop
forget
quiz.
anything, then it's not my fault.
Yeah, blame Kevin, yeah. Who are some of the key technology providers on the, obviously the truck side?
Yeah, so truck side, we've been working with Game Creek Video, as we have been all season long on Thursday Night Football and on our ANFL. We started a process ahead of Thursday Night Football to really go through and evaluate equipment and making sure that when we go to HDR, and the drawings and the people who were with us will tell you, all the drawings that we did basically came down to the fact that we still are vastly going to have, multiples of viewers in SDR, like millions of viewers in SDR, and that the HDR for that, I think, on the whiteboard I had 50,000 viewers.
Right, so 100 million TV viewers probably at least.
Yeah, so we want to make sure that we are protecting that SDR. So we went through and we were evaluating a bunch of equipment, making sure that things like sponsor logos and all of that return properly, so that McDonald's Red is McDonald's Red and Coke Red is Coke Red and all of that. So providers that are doing that for us, we're using a lot of AJA equipment to the FSHDR to do tone mapping down to the SDR world and from SDR to HDR. There's a lot of little gotchas there, graphics and things like that. The tools to create HDR graphics really aren't there yet. Working with Sony with their HDR C4000 for the tone mapping, primarily all Sony cameras except for specialty ones. We're somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 high frame rate cameras just for the game. Who am I forgetting?
You forgot about everybody, really. I mean, you forgot about...
well, wireless, so who's probably like the wireless?
All right, so
it's best for me to list the categories.
The great thing about the Super Bowl is that you get to assemble your A team and you get to put them in the different categories you want. And just on HDR, I'll also say that Kevin and his gang did a really good job in the lab with Mike Drazen at Thumb War. And manufacturers like AJA, like Colorfront, right? Who else was there? I don't know. So Sony, of course. To make sure that this was right. So it was a measure twice, cut once experience. But
so wait, let me just ask. This is percolating in my brain. So you mentioned the McDonald's Red. Yeah. So do you want the McDonald's Red on HDR to match, and then whatever happens on SDR is fine, or do you try to match it differently for SDR, which would make the, what I'm saying?
So the color itself needs to match all the way around. McDonald's will tell you that is their red,
right,
regardless if it's HDR or SDR. How it plays and how it is in the rest of the frame is really where you see the HDR.
Right.
But it should look correct.
Okay.
McDonald's Red will always be McDonald's Red.
But it looks more red in HDR. more accurate. Or no?
It's the same.
No, the food just
same-
looks more
yeah.
delicious.
Yeah, the food looks much more.
So wireless at the game, we've got AVS, and the other thing I should mention is that we've got a big deployment in South Beach, because remember a few years ago that all the networks started to do week-long programming. Well, ours is in South Beach, right on the beach. Come on down. CP Communications is doing all of the wireless and video and audio and fiber and PA. They've got a nice little PA that they're actually a big PA that we use. So that's the wireless providers across the board.
And who's building that?
Oh, and then 3G is also doing some of our specialty rigs. So we've got a good smattering of all of the wireless companies working to their strengths.
Got one. Soundtronics is doing pregame audio and comms.
Soundtronics, yep. Soundtronics doing pregame audio. Like Kevin said, Game Creek over on the game side, NEP, who did our show in Houston 3 years ago, returns to do the facilities down in South Beach.
Compound distribution is Bexel.
Fletcher Robos.
Fletcher Robos. Filmworks is doing all of our sets.
Waste Management is doing the garbage. I think we're having
Wait, I
Honey
gotta ask,
Bucket doing the Porta Johns.
what's the power situation?
Cat is providing the power. We are. We've gone ahead. We've done the same thing we did in Houston. We've contracted with a couple of consultants to help us make sure that we are meeting our load and have the proper level of redundancies.
Yeah, this is a cool idea Kevin came up with, which I'd advise anybody like to do, in terms of these big shows, is a real power audit, right? Like power is a tricky business these days, and having somebody come in and look at what you're doing from a planning point of view and trying to poke holes in the plan is something that worked out real well in Houston, and we're going to continue on and in fact expand here.
Yeah, and I sit there and I say that there are two real showstoppers. Power is one and transmission is the other. If you don't have both of those, you're not going to have a show. So we sit there and we rely on grid power. We rely on multiple generator power. We have A power, B power. We have separate domestic power. All sorts of different redundancies built in. I think the one thing we've learned throughout the processes, though, is it is entirely possible to overcomplicate things and basically set a trap for yourselves that you don't see. Right.
Yeah.
By trying to
especially
over-engineer it.
with power, that can happen a lot. Oh, and then and transmission for sure. I mean, switching trucks and whatever. But Kevin's come up with a really good plan. We're working with CenturyLink and AT&T to make that happen. And forget the SAT vendor, PSSI.
I don't know.
Yeah, it was one of the SAT vendors. But yeah, Kevin leads a tremendous team of all-stars who all kind of have our backs to make this all go.
Yeah.
Right, sure.
Everything transmission-wise is hitless merge, so taking multiple paths. And we've taken things that we've learned from U.S. Open Golf, from World Cup, from 2017, and this show is basically building on top of all of those. Right. So hopefully we're taking the best in breed and what we've learned from those and applying it.
Are there any dual sky cams or anything like that for this?
Yeah, actually, the Skycam's cool this year because Miami. If you haven't seen the re-rendered version of Miami, it was going to be in Kevin's video, but he screwed it up. They had these spires in Miami, so Stephen Wharton of Skycam figured out how to rig off of those spires. So we have a high Skycam, but only two. We figured that's
Okay. Not three? Can you go for
two's enough.
Well,
All right. So yeah, there's one outside too. So there is three technically. I suppose.
Obviously, we're in an age where you heard it yesterday from all the remote production providers. Everybody wants more for less. the decision to go 1080p HDR for the studio shows, was that any additional cost there? I mean, obviously you make this Miami, the
Kevin,
colors will pop, it'll be good.
I don't know. Kevin wanted
Pat
to do
said
it.
that there's absolutely no additional cost associated with it.
Yeah, well, that
whatsoever.
was pretty sweet of him. That was nice of actually both Pat and NEP. I didn't know why they did that, but yeah, no cost. It was all good.
A lot of it, quite honestly, is it's easier. You know, once you sit there and you start talking about having a compound that large and having to distribute that many signals and sharing that many signals to keep everything in one format without having to tone map up and down, it reduces complexities.
Yeah, so when we did the postseason baseball, we did the pregame in 1080i SDR, obviously, in the game, in 1080p HDR, and there was a massive amount of conversions, and a few things, if you were watching carefully, might have slipped through that weren't properly tone mapped. So we did learn our lesson that way. It wasn't a disaster, but we realized that we were putting exponents onto this. So doing everything on one format was key, and Kevin fought for that.
Right. And just from a distribution standpoint, it makes it much, much easier. We only have to really tone map on the endpoints for really just for international and for the house feed.
Right, gotcha. Now, how about the audio side of things? Is there any kind of Atmos or just at least 5.1 or?
Oh yeah, 5.1 for sure. Not Atmos yet, but 5.1, and Fred Aldis and his team out there kind of doing their thing, and it'll sound great. See, it's funny because the Super Bowl is actually a really good sounding game. Why? Because the crowd's actually not that into it.
Right.
Right? Because this is a lot of hospitality, a lot of corporate. There aren't too many diehards there, so with the reduced crowd noise, you actually get a very good sounding game. And what our audio people always like is an open roof. And for finally, we haven't done a Super Bowl with an open roof since New York, so they finally get one of those. So no excuses.
Right. And I guess obviously, Kevin, you were mentioning the rest of you're just waiting to get through March, and I was kind of, well, this game's on February 2nd, so you should be fine. And there's not, but do you want to roll through the rest of your schedule for that month? What are you doing next day?
So next day I'm flying to Doha for a World Cup meeting that is taking place on Wednesday and Thursday. Friday, head back for the launch of XFL, and then the following weekend is Daytona 500. So March 1st is looking really good right about now.
Yeah, the trucks that we use, the pregame trucks, Cletus, one of the best names I think ever for a truck, don't you think, Keith? That truck does our pregame, but then it's got to skedaddle down to Daytona. Luckily, it's not a heck of a drive, although we're kind of worried about the NFC Championship to the Super Bowl. That might be a bit of a drive, right?
It could be. Another little worry in there, potential.
Maybe San Francisco, I'm guessing?
Well, San Francisco or Seattle. Seattle would be worse.
God, yeah, right.
But even ahead of that, it's we're looking at the divisional round, and it's entirely possible, if not likely, that New Orleans would host a divisional playoff game on January 11th or 12th, and the national championship game is there on the 13th.
Right.
That'll be fun.
Oh, that'll be fun. Interesting. Good to know. All right, we're actually out of time. So this is a great little overview. I think people have had their appetite whet. So as far as last thing is, so where will they be able to watch this? Do you know where, what devices, what services, HG?
You watch it on TV, Ken.
Oh, there's it. Is it?
Yeah. There's a whole list of, I don't want to go into them just to omit, but all the big MVPDs are represented for the HDR distribution, as well as a variety of OTT MVPDs, not the least of which is Fox Sports app. So it's definitely worth a look. Tell us what you think. For those of you who are going to be down there, just let us know. Come down and see our set in South Beach. You can't miss it. I will tell you that. We're just hoping for a good show and hopefully a good game.
Sounds good. Great. Well, thanks, guys.
Cool. Thanks, Ken.
Thanks.